G'day, Torah Tuesday, Genesis 47 and 48. These final chapters of Genesis, they're all about blessing. Blessing between the Egyptians and the Israelites, blessing from Jacob to his sons, blessing to his grandchildren. It's all blessings. But it's no surprise because the whole book of Genesis has been focused on that theme of blessing. Chapter 1, God blessed them, Adam and Eve, and he said, fill the earth and subdue it, be fruitful and multiply. Chapter 3, as they turn from God, their blessing is turned into curse. But then in chapter 12, God persists with humanity and he blesses Abraham and he tells Abraham that he will be a blessing and the whole world will be blessed through him. See, blessing has been the theme throughout the whole of the book of Genesis because blessing is the main theme as you follow through the life of Abraham's family as well. Abraham passes his blessing on to Isaac, and Isaac passes his blessing on to Jacob, not Esau, although Esau gets a different kind of blessing, I guess. And we'll see in the coming weeks that Jacob will pass his blessing on to his children as well. So the book finishes talking about blessing as the family of Israel begins to stay in Egypt. So, we have them arriving in Egypt. Jacob's descendants are all of them. It's good that they are there. God actually confirms that it is good they are there in a vision to Jacob, which I think is significant because the beginning of the Exodus story will tell us that even though it was good, it didn't last. It wasn't good forever. Jacob has been reunited with his lost son, and it's a really emotional and wonderful scene. And in this chapter, we see that there are two audiences with Pharaoh. The brothers of Joseph meet with Pharaoh, and Jacob meets with Pharaoh. So let's talk about this first audience with Pharaoh. The brothers, they tell the Pharaoh what they do for work, why they have come to Egypt because of the famine. And Pharaoh says that he is happy to have them in the land, and he even asks that they would care for some of his flocks. So it goes well. The family is to settle comfortably into Egypt, and they have the blessing of Pharaoh. And then we have the audience between Pharaoh and Jacob. Jacob comes before Pharaoh, and surprisingly, the Pharaoh is the one who was blessed by Jacob, not the other way around. And actually, Jacob blesses Pharaoh twice. Now, the reason that is surprising is because you might think that the Pharaoh is the one who hands out the blessing. Pharaohs were seen as gods incarnate. But no, the blessing is twice handed out by Jacob, who's a shepherd man from Canaan. He's a nobody. But even if he is a nobody, he has the blessing from God. And so he has something to give. Pharaoh's one question for Jacob is, how old are you? Probably suggesting that Jacob is looking pretty worse for wear at this point. But Jacob's response, I think, is really important. He says, the years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers. Few and difficult, he says. Let's keep in mind that when Abraham comes to his dying day, it says in Genesis, he died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. When Isaac dies, it says, then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. Old and full of years is how Abraham and Isaac are described. It sounds complete. There's something whole about it. But then Jacob's life is described as few and difficult. He has been deceptive, conniving, swindling. He has lost his beloved wife. His beloved son was gone. He will die in a foreign land. Few and difficult. Now, that's not how you want your life to be described when it reaches its end. Few and difficult years. And yet, despite Jacob's hard life, he has the blessing of God. He blesses the richest king in the world in one of the last episodes of his life. Something I'm taking from this is that your lot in life is not all that matters. You may have a life that can be summed up as few and difficult years, but that's not all that matters. And especially as you come to your last day, your lot in life matters little compared to the way that God sees you. Having the blessing of God is far more important than the lot that you have in life. Let's keep moving. We get a full explanation in the next section about the way that Joseph was able to save the Egyptian people from starvation. The people paid all their money to get grain, and then a year later, they had no money to give, and so they gave their livestock to get more grain. And then a year later, they had no more livestock to give, so they gave themselves and their land in order to get grain. So they became tenants on their own land. The land actually belonged to Pharaoh. But Joseph, in his kindness, he says that 1/5 of the produce of their land would go to Pharaoh, and the other 4/5 could be for the people who are tenanted on the land. It's pretty remarkable that he would set up a deal like that. And the people are appreciative. They say in verse 25, "You have saved our lives. May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be in bondage to Pharaoh." It might sound a little bit uncomfortable to think about the fact that these people were in indentured slavery of sorts. But I think it's important to recognize that the slavery of this ancient period in this part of the world is not akin to the slavery that we're familiar with talking about. Usually slavery from the context of the transatlantic slave trade, particularly slavery in the United States and even in Southern America and the Caribbean islands. This is not slavery in the same way. I just want to read this quote for you. "Memories of the African slave trade color our view of slavery so that we cannot understand this expression of gratitude." They say, "You've saved our lives." But in ancient society, slavery was an accepted way of bailing out the destitute, and under a benevolent master, it could be quite a comfortable status. Indeed, the law envisages some temporary slaves electing to become permanent slaves rather than take the freedom to which they are entitled after 6 years of service. Ancient slavery, at its best, was like tenured employment, whereas the free man was more like someone who is self-employed. The latter may be freer, but he faces more risks. So this taking them on as slaves, it's actually an act of benevolence. It's an act of kindness to these people. And they see it that way. "You've saved our lives," they say. We'll talk more about slavery when we come to the chapters that give laws about slavery in Deuteronomy. There's lots more to be said on the matter. The last chapter that we read today is about Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and their relationship to Jacob. And it's all a part of Jacob's blessing to the next generation. So we're going to talk about that next week as we read Jacob's blessing to the 12 sons, as well as the blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh. But in the meantime, catch you later.